It's 11:11. Make a wish.
Hi, and welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Megan. And as I was editing this, I realized that we actually have enough content for another episode. So the interview with our patient advocate is actually going to be in 3 parts. And coming up following that, we have an interview with a panel of people, and it's not people you might think that we would choose to interview, but our mission is to uplift marginalized voices. And as such, in this particular community of Ehlers-Danlos and connective tissue disorder patients, men are disproportionately represented. Now, what I mean by that is not that they're not Ehlers-Danlos patients. It's just that you don't see as many men discussing chronic pain like you do women. And there's a whole variety of reasons that might be. But anyway, that's not what this episode is. This episode is the continuation of our discussion with Megan that we started last week. And for those on the video feed, you will notice that there was not a video last week. I didn't have the mental wherewithal, or actually physical wherewithal, to do what I needed to do to make the video component of it work. I have done that for this week. So this week, your episode will be parts 1 and 2 at the same time. Let's get going on our interview with Megan.
What I was explaining before too, we use a process of elimination for a lot of things, right? So when you are trying to eliminate if you have a bladder problem or a pelvic floor problem or which part of your pelvic floor is the problem, right?
Right.
So there's a drug called Azo or Pyridium, and it's over the counter. It's something, makes your pee turn orange. A lot of people are familiar with it when they take it for urinary tract infections. So if you take that drug and your symptoms go away, it's your bladder. It's something in your bladder that is the problem, right?
So if I take that and I still have problems,
well, it's probably, it might, for your case, that we talked about, it's probably a multitude of different things. But you know that if that relieves your symptoms, which symptoms does it relieve? Does it make your adrenaline go away? Does it help you sleep better at night? Does it like what things is it impacting? Or is it not impacting anything at all? Right. So, and there's another drug we use sometimes called hyoscamine. It actually relaxes all of the smooth muscle, and your bladder has a lot of smooth muscle. Okay. So if your bladder pain goes away when you take hyoscamine, you know that you have maybe a smooth muscle problem.
Can you help me understand when you say bladder pain? What does bladder pain mean? Because I hear bladder pain and I'm like, don't know what that means. Does that mean always having to pee? Feeling that urgency? Does it feel like someone's stabbing my bladder?
Everybody's different. I mean, interstitial cystitis, some patients tell me that they feel like they have razor blades in their bladder. Some patients tell me they just feel like they have to pee all the time. Some people feel nothing.
Well, so that's my question. If I say I always have to pee, does that count as bladder pain? If it's because it severely impacts my life. Like I feel like I'm always peeing. If I'm going somewhere new or strange, I'm worried about where the bathroom is. We went to the park yesterday. I have a pop-up changing tent and a bucket and a urinal with a cup so I can pee because I never know. And sometimes it's good.
Well, but you also talked about sphincter issues, right?
Well, yeah, like I can't. Yeah,
when
like
I
can't
relax,
and I can't.
yeah.
Or yeah.
So in your case, now as an advocate, I can't say, like there's strict lines on what I can say and what I can't say.
Right.
As you are my friend, and I'm telling you, your issues are very complex, and
I don't feel that complex though. I guess okay, I see.
But what I mean is,
I have multiple.
Is there multiple things together, right?
Yeah.
And the way to tease out which thing is, you have to be very scientific about, you try one thing and then you try another and then you get a test and you use all of the information together to try to figure out what the best treatment overall for you is, right?
Right.
And I help patients navigate, you know, between what they want to do, lifestyle changes, what their doctor wants to do. You know, if the doctor isn't ordering the proper tests, like, you know, like for in your case, like if you think you have interstitial cystitis, you might want a cystoscopy where they look inside, but you also might just want to get a clinical diagnosis from somebody who knows the disease.
Yeah.
Because cystoscopy, there's risks to it, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, the number one thing people need to realize is the bladder is one of the places that the mast cells just really attack and can cause interstitial cystitis. So,
Right.
yeah, so that, you know, if you think you have mast cell disease, so what was recommended to me when I thought I might have mast cell disease, they told me to try H1 and H2 blockers 1 to 2 times a day and a mast cell diet and be very strict with this for a month or two.
So
And then
low
stop.
histamine,
Yes.
like a SOT to FODMAP.
No,
Oh, no,
that
those are
is
no.
different.
Oh,
But
that's
that's
right.
also an important
Yeah.
diet to try for people. So yeah, so that was recommended to me. And then they said to stop at cold turkey and see, you know, does your pain get better? Does your POTS get better? What do these things do to your body? What impacts do they have? And for me, a lot of my pain is not cell related. A ton of it. I had, you know, all sorts of weird swelling and pain and issues that I did not think at all could be related to mast cell. And now that I'm on ketotifen and, you know, the mast cell stabilizers, I have a different life. I have a much
So
different life.
the ketotifen, how do you go about doing that?
So ketotifen is one of those things that's not FDA approved in
Right.
the US, but it's over the counter in some other countries,
Right.
right? It's not a dangerous drug. It's just not profitable for them to bring it here.
Just not.
Yeah, because
marketed
who's
and
gonna
sold in the
take it?
United States.
Mast cell patients, but they don't think mast cell is really, you know, doctors still don't really recognize it as a legitimate disease a lot of the time. So
But they know that mast cells exist.
okay, funny enough, yes.
I like. Okay.
So mast cells are very complex. And when I was in college, I took, you know, and my degrees are in molecular biology, biochemistry, and bioinformatics.
Oh, damn.
And
Maybe
I did some molecular biology research. I did a lot of bioinformatics stuff. Like I did a lot of genome analyzing. But basically I had a professor that he also ran the Tasman herpes virus lab and had all sorts of really cool viral knowledge and
we're
vaccine
gonna
knowledge and things.
swirl into one of my special interests about
Yeah.
COVID being herpetic, but we're not going to do that.
Well, another day. So I sat down with him and I said, you know, we're taking this class, but like haven't learned about mast cells. And he's like, you know, he's like, they're so complex
This would be a
that,
class.
you know, and he would sit down with me and talk to me about them, about his knowledge about them. But like it's just not a thing they go over a lot of these programs. So they don't, like, a lot of professors, from my understanding, choose not to teach about it. And because I don't think they understand the relevance of them. But then if you look, like all allergic conditions have a mast cell component when you have an allergy.
They know about mast cells, right? Like, they do, but so I get that medical application is just not pertinent to their like practice.
But if we, I think the research is getting there.
Right. So
that-
this is
that
that
it
higher
really
level
could
advocacy
does.
work
Yeah.
that we're talking about. So
Yeah.
the kind of day-to-day doctor visit, okay, fine, whatever. You don't know what mast cell is, whatever.
Yeah.
But if we
But I
can
think
make
the
this
position
part of
is
the
much as I can.
conversation,
Yeah.
there's where the difference happens.
I think that there are a lot of doctors, newer doctors out there, that really recognize this. They care. Post COVID, we've learned that ketotifen is a really great treatment for it. And yeah, okay, so back to how to get it. There's a lot of compounding pharmacies that make it if you have a prescription. It is kind of expensive to have drugs
Right.
compounded. So there are legitimate ways to get them overseas legally. You know, and then, you know, major manufacturers make it, right? It's
Right.
not like it's like a, but of course, like it's dangerous to not know where you're getting
Right, it's
medication
scary.
sources from, right? There are some Canadian pharmacies, Japanese pharmacies that have a good reputation, that the brand, manufacturers are that have a good reputation.
Right.
And I work individually with patients that need all sorts of unique drugs that they get in different places. There's a lot of things that really need to be tested. Like peptides could be a really incredible
Yeah.
thing, but we don't we don't know. I mean, BPC 157, I've worked with a lot of patients who've had doctors prescribe it and they've healed their guts. They don't have gastroparesis anymore. They don't have
Well,
no. So peptides,
I've seen collagen peptides that like
but their peptides are kind of like a new arena. They can actually change all sorts of things in the body, and we don't know enough yet. It's really scary to just buy something off the internet, and but there are compounding pharmacies that are making these things in a safe way. The question is, are these drugs safe? Who are they safe for? We need a lot more research. Same with prolotherapy. It's technically still very
Yeah. And if you-
experimental.
And if you look at the research for things like that, it seems very biased because there's not a lot of people looking into it. The people that are looking into it are the people selling it.
right.
Yeah, but we've done PRP for certain
Mhm.
conditions, like I forget what the condition is. Not carpal tunnel. I think it's something similar. For instance, to avoid surgery.
Yeah.
And I think some of those regenerative medicine treatments are really the way of the future, but they need to be properly.
Right. So like if you try it, it's almost experimental within yourself. So that's one of those conversations that you would have with a patient. Say, like you talked about with like
Yeah.
a drug, like here are all your prescription options. So you could also talk about like procedural or injectable options.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't bring up the experimental stuff
Yeah.
unless they do. I don't want, I bring up the evidence-based things, like for instance, mast cell disease. These are the, POTS. These are the, that people
There is
want to know.
research.
Yeah, like because I don't want to, but there are patients that have tried everything. And now, usually when a patient comes to me and say they've tried everything, they don't know ketotifen even exists,
Right.
right? Most patients really are well educated, but a lot of patients think they know all exists because their doctors said, "Oh, you've tried everything."
Right.
No, you haven't tried ketotifen. That's one of the cornerstones of treatment for a lot of people.
And the unfortunate thing in the Ehlers-Danlos community is that we are the resources.
I
So,
learn more from patients.
yeah. So is there, something that a patient has come back to you and said, I wish I had come to see you sooner about this, or
I mean, me specifically, but like, I wish I had known this sooner. I mean, autism is a huge thing. I had somebody send me a message. So I'm talking to somebody on the internet, and this is not a patient, but I get this sentiment from patients a lot that, I say, you should go to embraceautism.com and take the RADSAR just to see what your score is, because they're telling me how they memorize large amounts of information and all sorts of things that are very usually tied to autism. And they told me their score. It's a very high score. And they got very angry. And they got angry at the system
Right.
for
for
not
family,
diagnosing them. They said I felt different my whole life.
We knew
I didn't know what
we
it
knew there was
was.
And when you tried to say you were a lot
Well, a lot of
It's offended.
our characteristics were made out to be character flaws.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But not just that, like there's a trust in the medical system that we're taught at a young age that doctors they know everything, and then we gaslight ourselves when a doctor says, "Oh no, you don't have this thing,"
Yeah.
and then
Or we don't even know to ask or to be like, this is a weird thing,
right.
but this is a problematic thing.
Especially if that problematic thing happens to your parents too. So I'm glad you brought up doctors. You said, because doctors don't always know.
Yeah, they're not trained on EDS and MCAS
So
and all
how
that
do they
stuff.
respond to someone like you? How are they usually receptive? Do they get angry?
It depends. I've had everything from doctors just blatantly telling me, I want you to tell me what to prescribe this patient and when. That's outside of my scope of practice. Like I will give them the scientific information and tell them the options.
Right.
But I'm not going to go outside something ethically, right? And then I've had doctors be like, yell at me and say awful things. And I mean, like, you
So it's
can't
really one
imagine.
extreme to the other, but like
Yeah.
you never know.
Who do you think you are telling me what this patient may or may not have and blah blah blah? They're just drug seeking and blah blah blah. I know what a drug seeker looks like. I mean, like these.
Yeah, but
It's
yeah,
crazy.
he does know. He's probably said it to every single Ehlers-Danlos patient.
Yeah.
So do most providers react with like understanding or welcoming to collaborate with you and your patient?
It depends. So almost all doctors will let me in the appointment. Most doctors, it's a conversation where I can speak to the patient and speak to the doctor and chime in and help fill in the parts of their story and help the conversation be organized.
You will know where context is needed in relation to some
Yeah.
things that the doctor says the patient might not.
Yeah, because I'll know like what things need to be shared. I usually go over with the patient what we're going to talk about, but then the doctor might have questions that the patient freezes up and can't answer.
Right.
But I've talked to this patient for 25 hours before I know the answer to that for them, you know?
And also this isn't your personal appointment. You're there, so you're more
Sure.
regulated.
Yeah.
And then you've also had a consultation, like so you have a relationship with the patient to be
Absolutely.
able to be prepared.
Absolutely. And I always ask the patient what they're okay with me sharing and not. I mean, a lot of these patients have had intense trauma by the medical system and they're scared to tell doctors certain symptoms because they're scared that the doctors can think they're crazy. Or they've had sexual assault before and they don't want a doctor knowing why they don't want a urodynamic study,
Right.
you know?
And that's not uncommon because the statistics of autistic people being sexually assaulted and victimized are much higher than the rest of the population.
But I do say most doctors, honest to God, want to help patients and don't know how, or they're stressed out
And
and
just hamstrung by the system that they're in.
Do they appreciate having
a lot of them
this
really do.
to kind of
Any good
organize-
doctor really does appreciate it.
So
when
why
a
do you think this
doctor
isn't part of our healthcare system as like just
shouldn't be needed. It shouldn't be needed. Doctors should be able
When
to
you
do
just said
this.
there's like a whole patient advocacy degree program, I was like, what the fuck?
like is this just a product of like capitalist
Yeah.
Western medicine?
Yeah, it's a product of, well, several things. The reason patient advocates are needed specifically for Ehlers-Danlos is that every doctor, we can't teach all doctors about Ehlers-Danlos and the complexity
Which is
level.
complex,
Yeah, that they need to know to treat us. So somebody like me that does more of a consulting role is really important for some of those patients. Advocates.
Not a lot of resources. Like, I mean, you said
Yeah.
the consortium is just now starting to put out.
Oh, I've been doing it for since
Yeah,
2017.
Pregnancy paper.
But a pregnancy paper.
My
yeah.
youngest child will be 19
Yeah.
this year.
So there's CEUs, but is a doctor going to spend their continuing education time on just this one condition? Probably
No.
not.
So
Probably not.
so me being a partner
They were smart. They were
in
open.
educating them, I think is really important. I think that it's a travesty that I need to be there with a patient just for them to be heard or understood by a doctor and not seen as a drug seeker. I think it's, yes, I think there's always going to be a need for patient advocates with autistic people and people who can't really communicate for themselves and who have
Or
medical
we struggle
trauma.
to perceive and express our symptoms or even know what is happening in our bodies to be able to
even know if some of the symptoms are. I want to talk about red flags, potential red flags.
I don't know any bad advocates.
But like I said, do people go into advocacy without
No.
an advocate's heart? Probably.
I mean, so here's the thing, there are a lot of them that are not educated in EDS, so there's a, that's okay. So there's a Maryland, like Mid-Atlantic advocates group that I'm part of, and 2 of us actually have EDS and work a lot with EDS patients, and everybody else just sees them here and there.
But so you guys have a network of advocates, so then you guys would be like, oh, this is my resource for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and they come to me and they ask questions, and I'm always happy to do co-consults and whatever. But, I think, there absolutely, just like there are bad people out there, I mean, I think you get the vibes of whether, if they're trying to diagnose you, and if they're trying to, if they're overstepping their bounds, you can read what their competencies are on the BCPA site. And if they are going outside of their ethical and legal bounds of what they're supposed to be doing, then, that's up to you if you're comfortable with whatever they're doing or not. I mean, there's ethics
there's always gonna be a
and regulations for a reason, but, some patients, need rides to medical appointments, and maybe that goes against the ethics, and it's more of a caregiver, but sometimes patients need a friend and need a, I don't know. I mean,
Well, so that's my next question was going to be, what are the actual? Do you set your expectations for the client or patient individually based on what that particular client needs, or
well,
is there anything a patient absolutely should not do, like text you at all hours? Like, I mean,
I'm available 24/7. I don't sleep sometimes. No. So yes, I have.
That's why I would be
boundaries.
scared. Okay,
Yeah,
you set boundaries
I have
up front.
boundaries with, okay, look, the reality is sometimes my clients need me at all hours of the night, and
Because sometimes you're telling them that
Well,
you
right.
need to go to the ER.
yeah. So, let me turn this on again. Okay, so the reality is I love helping people. And if I'm up at 2:00 in the morning and they're up at 2:00 in the morning, if they have a question and I'll check my phone, is there I'm gonna answer them. But there are some patients I have that do not have self-control issues.
So you would have to have more strict boundaries.
Yes, or I have to, I mean, I go out of my way to help someone for free a lot. I need to be able to set the boundaries of, okay, if I'm going to help you with this, like I actually have to be paid for, my time if it goes over what we've discussed in budgeting and stuff. Because I can't help other people if I don't have if I'm using all my spoons
We're
today to
still
help
in a
somebody
system that
that's,
requires you to get an income.
yeah, I have to pay my mortgage,
Right. Right.
whatever. And so, it is a lot about personal boundaries and professional boundaries, are very important. If you feel like an advocate's not being professional, a lot of people don't want the professionalism. They want somebody to, for lack of a better term, shoot the shit with and really discuss their pain with and, really empathize.
So they need a support.
Yeah, on a more, and I feel like I have to be as professional as possible while being empathetic and doing what they need and really stay within.
So that
the
really
ethics
speaks
of-
to there's
yeah.
a lack of support systems for us, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are some patients who, I think they use our sessions as kind of a venting and a support and a healing. And I don't want to, they need to be referred to a mental health specialist for some of this stuff. And I need to make sure that, I'm supporting them in the ways an advocate should support them. But,
There's a line between
Yeah.
validation and
yeah, absolutely. And I've thought about getting a license to be a therapist too, but I think what I do is if I stay with what I'm doing, I think I make a really good impact and I don't think I need to necessarily do
and
that.
so many of us are called into these helping roles. Like, and I've had the same thought. I was like, I need to go get my PhD so I can go, do mental health treatment for neurodivergent people. I
Yeah.
think that's greatly lacking in trauma
Yeah.
informed care. And I was like, no, wait a minute. I'm in the right seat on
Yeah.
the bus. so many of us think these things, like going back to school, now that I know I can help, and so we have a
Being
whole
a patient
podcast, yeah.
advocate is like one of the best, you know,
Yeah.
when you podcasting,
Yeah.
we all do, we all have our roles, right?
Yeah.
And,
So many younger people I've talked to in our community, they ask me about, well, do you think I can make it through medical school? Do you think
Yeah.
I can make it through genetics? Do you think I can make it through? And this, I think a lot of them maybe aren't considering that as a career, like you
Yeah.
found your path in that way. Is it
I do career counseling
Yeah.
for some people too. Like, there's somebody in my local support group who has a kid that's 18. Like, well, what jobs can she do with pots? And I was like, look, I'm happy to consult with her. You know, like she could be a receptionist at a hair salon, or you know, like I can help give them ideas. I can help write accommodations for school and work, and you know, the
That's-
horrible thing about
I've
accommodations.
struggled with trying to figure
We don't know
out
what
the-
exists
Yeah.
half the time, right?
Yeah, and that's not how, like, if you go
Ah,
to write
see,
it,
I know people who know what exists in this.
so like the school expects you to tell you what the accommodation
Yes.
is needed, and then they don't need it in.
Right, well, yes. And then they rely on the fact that you'll be too overwhelmed to call them out.
Oh,
on it.
or that the child is too embarrassed by peer pressure to actually want
Yeah.
to take it out.
Well, but you know, with college, for instance, like people don't know that they can take in some colleges, they'll let you take a test in a room all to yourself, lying on the floor, listening to music. I mean, that's how I went from getting C's to A's in some, because I couldn't take a test in a freezing cold room at 8 o'clock in the morning with
I ran out of
75
relatives that were dying when
people.
I was in college.
the what you
I ran out of relatives that died. I made shit up to not go to the test so I could make it up
So-
later.
I
I
was
made shit up.
I was fortunate. I went to a school where we had like an honor system, so we could take wherever we wanted to in the library. We could go take a test. So I would always go hide in the archives, so where nobody went, because it was
And it's hard when you know the information and you know it so well, but you cannot get it on the paper because your hip is dislocated and you're sitting up and the POTS issues are so bad that your brain just cannot get blood. And you're like, why can't I write this? You know, and it's a travesty that so many
Or your hand.
people.
I know why Rob did so
Can't
bad on
do
that SAT the first time. He
We
had a
used to-
migraine and like couldn't see the whole time, but he didn't know how to like articulate.
Yeah, remember the little booklets where you used to have to handwrite essays?
Yes.
The trauma.
Yeah, and then like typing, if you could just type it, you know, like I watched a lecture the other day. Yeah, I'm an information sponge, right? So I'm watching a lecture about something online. The professor tells all the people in the room to put their laptops away because it's distracting him. I'm like, no, this is awful. These kids, like a normal person, let alone a disabled person, can't use a laptop to take notes.
Yeah,
Like this is like
That was distracting
the professor said everybody in the room had to put their laptops away.
because the laptops were distracting.
Yes. I mean, like people don't know their rights, right? You know, like it's, you know, I in college I had the PowerPoints printed out ahead of time for me so that I could see them and you know, process the information while the teacher was talking and not have to worry about my blurry vision of the days that my POTS was so bad I couldn't have.
Or
You
the
know.
fact that I would get in trouble for wearing sunglasses in class because the fluorescence made me crazy. And I had a history professor who was like, "Heck, that was on. I can't do this. I can't sit here." I didn't know it. It was just like I had learned ways to self-accommodate, but I didn't know I had a right. I didn't know I was disabled. Yeah.
Well, people don't know their rights generally medically. And the other thing I hate assisting with lawsuits because but sometimes they really are needed because patients are really significantly harmed. I mean, one of my first jobs was in medical error research, and things that happen to patients are it's really disgusting what happens in the system and how so many different types of systems don't value reporting. You know, it's punitive when you report instead of, luckily I worked in a system that really cared about that, and they were looking at how to improve medical error because it was the third leading cause of death before the pandemic, misdiagnosis, delayed diagnosis. So especially in women,
Any marginalized people.
Yeah, you know, there, for God's sakes, like there's a whole, for African Americans, there's a whole different kidney value,
Oh, yeah.
right? But we're finding out now, no, there's not. They're just going into kidney failure sooner. Like,
Right.
you know, like all of these things that,
Or when there are actual differences, it's not even taught. So I have a friend who's
Yeah.
he's a Black cardiologist, and it makes him insane that it's not taught in school that African Americans that are descendants of slaves have a different type of hypertension,
yeah.
and it's treated differently.
And I have to learn about all of these things and advocate for people that, you know, so that they're taken seriously and that they get appropriate help before it's too late, you know, for them to have serious consequences, right? So, you know, I've had a lot of patients with a lot of weird things happen. And, you know, I had a patient the other day, she had ovarian torsion. Do you think these things are rare? I've had 2 ovarian torsions in the last 6 months of patients that have gone in that they were going to send them home that they just thought it was their period or a little cyst.
And they were PDS patients.
Yeah, both of them were EDS patients, and one of them was a younger person, had to have emergency surgery, and my role was to make sure she didn't die during surgery. You know, like the doctors were willing to talk to me about the MCAS protocols, about the, you know, I sent them articles about, you know, sutures, different types of sutures they could use, things like that, to make sure that the patient, you know, didn't go into anaphylaxis, didn't have a
And the
dysautonomia
dysautonomia
reaction. You know, there's journal articles on these things, there's
Mhm.
protocols that the doctors.
Yeah, I recently
wouldn't
had
look
to
up.
make that call and be like, you need to give this person more fluids
Yeah,
because, you know, the pressures were.
yeah. And that's the thing, they can really harm a patient if they're using medicine to lower their blood pressure or make their blood pressure higher instead of giving them fluids, because the fluids are the thing that really balances
Yeah.
everything out for these patients. So, you know,
And that's a family, like I'm advocating for a family member, like, and so many of us don't have these resources. Like we, the 3 of us have clearly made this our special interest, but we still don't know everything.
Really?
Yeah.
and I don't claim to know everything at all. And that's another red flag. If anybody says they know everything,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
I don't know what field you're
You
in.
want an advocate who's willing to say, I don't know that, or let me look at
Yes.
that, or here's someone I can
Yeah.
refer you to that has
When
experience
someone-
with that.
Yeah.
When someone asks me how to find a doctor to treat their EDS,
Yeah.
I tell them, well, there's not an EDS specialist. There's very rare that someone's made that their path. You want to find a doctor who's willing to seek answers and educate themselves.
Yeah.
To help their
Yeah.
patient.
Because it's not easy to do in this healthcare
No.
system.
It's not. And, you know, I want to produce more resources like, you know, YouTube lectures or whatever, because a lot of the things that I talk to patients about one-on-one, you know, a lot more people need to hear
Well,
it.
just the treatment protocols for migraine and EDS,
All
for
right, forget you.
you know, for post-surgical treatments, for one of my passions is I would just love it if we did co-referrals for ADHD and autism every
Yeah.
time we find a hypermobile human and vice versa.
Yeah.
It feels like it's obvious to me,
But
but
that's the thing, is like, there's a list of things that I think every zebra should be
yeah, the list,
looked into,
the
right?
list of
I think
things
everybody
about
should
it.
take the Radzar. It takes 10 minutes to
Yeah.
do online. I think everybody should, you know. Now, there's the thing. As an advocate, I can't say I think everybody should do this, right? That's not my
Right, that's
hat
not
to
our
stay as an advocate. As a person with EDS that has, you know,
That's
this is my personal
I'm
opinion,
valuable.
right?
Let's not stop at an echo.
Yeah.
We need to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if some body like the Ehlers-Danlos Society or the consortium had a protocol of what to do when you have an EDS,
Mhm.
all of the time.
If we had a treatment protocol
Yeah.
for whatever concern related to EDS, or like, this is the list of top referrals or specialties that you need to put on your patient's team, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to do, well, I guess what was the thing? Let's talk about food and then
Don't know if you could hear Alec there, but he was telling us that it was time to eat. And so that seemed like another good spot to break. And this is a reminder that if you haven't eaten, maybe you should. Until next week.
Bye.